So President Reed and I, as you know, went to China, and Cecily Burt's done some coverage. It was pretty accurate. We tried to Facebook, and we learned that we couldn't Facebook in China. That was the most interesting thing I learned. We tried to post our pictures, and so we had to send stuff to people here, and with the weekend not everything got posted. I thought, a very short version in my newsletter, so those of you who get our newsletter, I put in some of my pictures and a brief description of what we did. And I think, and Larry's been to China more times than I have been, but I think it represents sort of an evolution of where the Chinese investors in the government are, and also where we are as a city. In the past, the ports made a lot of trips, but more and more you see that the Chinese investors and government are more interested in vertical investments. Yes, we hope to get an airline here, and we talk more about what that would take. And yes, we think they're very close to considering building cold storage facilities because of the exports of food and wine to China. And I thought we moved that discussion forward. But more interestingly enough is many of the Chinese investment groups asked us about parallel investments or vertical investment. If they do an airline, they're interested in hotels. They're interested in other real estate around travel and tourism. And I think we opened that discussion, and that was pretty meaningful. I think that what you're going to see is that not only is Oakland now the only port that exports more than we import in the country, but you're going to see a better organization of California exporters. We were able to visit some of the California exporters in Hong Kong at the Food Expo. We loved our Oakland wines. We're able to serve those in a couple locations and talk to the media about Oakland being a wine country. And in general, it was very fast, mostly meetings, business meetings, 3 cities in about 5 days for all intents and purposes when you count, after you count travel.
I've been to China an awful lot, both as a staff person when Elihu Harris was in the legislature, and then when he became mayor, and then traveled back when with other mayors being in office. And I'm just telling you, out of all the trips I've gone to China, this has probably been the most fruitful trip that I've ever gone on. And I really appreciate the mayor and her leadership, her ability to articulate Oakland's interest and to just talk about this incredible city that we're a part of. I think this trip is going to bear some substantial fruit and opportunities that's not going to help us. Not only is it going to help us to change the city, but also create an incredible number of jobs. And if all plays out the way I'm hoping that it'll play out, we owe all the credit to the mayor and her leadership. And I just want to personally again tell her thank you very much for letting me tag along with her. It was truly an honor to watch her at work, and it was just a very impressive trip.
The reality is that by bringing Larry, who's the president of the council, and by myself being there in port, we sort of replicate what China does. I mean, when you go there, you don't just talk to the port people, you talk to the government officials, you talk to the investors, and so we're able to sort of match them. And I think that sent the signal that we're really serious, that we're really open for investment and business. Let me just add on to that. In June, I become the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And one of the things we tried to do in our earlier regional conference was to organize exporters more. What really struck us when we were at the Hong Kong food show is that other countries market themselves under these huge banners, and you can see these are all the Spanish products and these are all the Australian products. We had to wander around and find the California products, and quite frankly, California is like 1/10 of the country, but it's the 8th economy in and of itself. So one of the things I'm hoping to do is get California and get the governor to work with us to better market our products and better organize our product. Today I was at the League of City meetings, and I asked the mayor of Modesto to host a meeting for the port in the valley so that we can better organize our exporters. We ran into all sorts of dried fruit and nut exporters. We ran into a couple stalls of California wines, but you know, it was nothing like Spain or Australia or even Chile, where they clearly market all of their products rather than being so individualized. And I think we're going to try to play that role. It was sort of fun to go to the bar in Hong Kong where 22 East Bay wineries, none of them could do it by themselves, but they collectively have come together, and I'm hoping that other, in Shanghai and Beijing, that there'll be similar efforts to try to introduce our products. But our wine was the most popular gift that we gave to officials as we were traveling, and we're hoping that we will be able to follow up on that. We think there'll be some trips here now in response to the proposals we laid out, and I'm hoping that within a year or two we're going to see real results from the discussions that we started. So,
Councilman Reed, can you give a little bit more specific detail about why you think this was the most fruitful trip you've been on?
Because some of the other trips haven't borne fruit.
Mm-hmm.
I think
So
I just think the private sector companies that we've met with, and in their interests, like the mayor was saying, you know, we met with a company that has the fourth largest air carrier in the country of China, that really has an interest. And the mayor kind of nurtured that along. We spent almost 4 hours in meetings with them, discussing not just only the airlines, but maritime, as the mayor talked about the cold storage facility, talked about air cargo, and talked about their interest in doing the vertical building. I mean, these folks build some of the most incredible hotels. I would take any of their hotels and match it with any hotel in the United States. And then they build huge conference centers to go along. They have an interest in the whole tourist industry, and they build in entertainment. I mean, for me, you know, we're trying to do something special out in the Coliseum area that brings not only just the sporting, but all the entertainment, the retail, and the restaurants. And, you know, the mayor did very well articulating that vision, and I'm hoping that they will be visiting our city fairly soon. And so the mayor can put our staff to work and show them sites that we think make sense. For, you know, just build me 2 of these hotels, I'll be happy. Because I think it will allow us to be able to capture some of those mid-sized conferences that are skipping over Oakland, going to Santa Clara, or going to San Jose. These folks build first-class projects. And the retail that they build in the restaurants, it's truly remarkable what they've been able to accomplish in such a short period of time, and their interest in expanding into the United States even more. And as the mayor was saying about their interest in investing and doing the vertical building. So I think there's a great opportunity for them to come in and to do something real special in the city. And it wouldn't have happened if the mayor hadn't spent 4 hours in that meeting selling the opportunities here in the city of Oakland.
You know, China's going through its privatization slowly. So we talked to some state investment groups, and we talked to one that's semi-private with private investors. And so the fact that they'd spend, between the two, we probably spent ourselves 8 hours talking to the 2 different groups about very specific investments and opportunities. I think, again, the port usually goes to sell the airport and maritime. We went to sell the whole package, you know. If you're going to do airport, then what about tourism? What about hotels? We actually talked about all the development sites that are available in the city. And they have very wide interests now. And so, and they have a lot of capital because they're trying to balance off the balance of payments, because quite frankly, they're accumulating a lot of American dollars, so they're not bringing them all back home. They're actually beginning to invest more and more of them in the United States. So we'd like a share of those. And like we said, we really, Shenzhen just really always blows me away. I was one of the first Chinese Americans into China after Nixon. Shenzhen was this little tiny train stop, and I remember it very distinctly because it was the first stop into China, right? And it was just a few little Hakka ladies on the railroad station, and you could see the fishing village in the background. Now it's a city of 11 million people, and I put some of the skyscraper pictures. This amazing city that didn't exist 30 years ago, and now it's just this amazing city, and it's growing. It's their Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Right, and so that's why we're particularly trying to get a direct flight, because quite frankly, it would be very appealing for a lot of business people to have to skip Shanghai or Guangzhou or Hong Kong to go directly to their Silicon Valley from our Silicon Valley, basically. And we had the experience I told people we would. Whenever they asked us how big we were, and then we had to tell them how big the entire Bay Area was, they still think of us as just one region, this one little small region compared to 11 million people in Shenzhen, right? The whole Bay Area, we're about 8 million now, and maybe in a decade we'll be at 11, right? Which is how big Shenzhen is today. This is the time when cities go to the ICSC, which is the sort of the big retail conference. Attracting retail to Oakland is one of our priorities, so we'll be hopefully meeting with some of the developers who are doing it and some of the major retailers while we're in Las Vegas for about 2 days, Sunday, Monday, I guess 2.5 days, Sunday and Monday and Tuesday. And I'm bringing wines there to raffle off. But there hasn't been a mayor who's gone to ICSC in about a decade.
Yeah, I think Elliott was the last mayor that went.
Right, and I'll be giving a presentation, and they're doing this new thing where cities give presentations in sort of the open center, and we'll be doing that. We'll be hosting things at our booth. We're going to be having a major booth. I'm also going to use the opportunity to talk to a couple of the other mayors. I'll be talking to the mayor of Washington, and I'm hoping actually to talk to Las Vegas while I'm there. People, you guys are supposed to be working on that. Las Vegas, when we asked the U.S. Embassy people which city does the best job of marketing itself, Las Vegas was one of them, because the Chinese love to gamble, and apparently they've been very successful in getting Chinese tourists. I'm hoping to meet with the Las Vegas city officials also while I'm there. So that's pretty basic. Let me do a couple of these non-controversial ones, just to let you know. I'm having my final town hall meeting in Lares District this Saturday from 1 to 3:30. We already have had over 2,000 people attend our town hall meetings. We're going to be taking all of the things that came up in that and use that to sort of help us organize city services. We'll probably be having some follow-up meetings with neighborhood leaders that have come out of the town hall meetings. We've started on a few small projects that we've already been working on with some of the neighborhoods, but after this weekend, give us a week or two, we'll probably be doing a final sort of summary of the town hall experience. But that I've completed all the town halls. I made a pledge to have a town hall meeting in every city council district. We will be done this month. So we did it within about 5 months. I was hoping to do it a little sooner, but it took a lot of time and preparation, and we've done a lot of walking. I've been sneaking away at least a couple hours every weekend to join some of the other volunteers. We've been walking to get people to come out to these town hall meetings, and so the outreach has been pretty broad. Finally, this is Sue's thing. Some of you came to that little Reader's Digest whole thing. Well, I didn't think we had a chance, but apparently we won in our classification, and I'm getting $10,000 from my mentor program. There was this Reader's Digest, you voted online, and we're going to get a $10,000 donation for that. And I actually have another corporate donation that we're not quite ready to announce, but that's coming up.
One of the questions, one of the men who was shot was unarmed. Do you know why he was shot to death?
What I can tell you is the information we put out already is that we received information that there was a violent crime that was going to occur there in that block on that street. And so we did respond to that location. And once we were there, we located the vehicle that we were looking for. And during a investigative stop of that, we had 3 people in the vehicle. All 3 got out of the car. 2 of the 3 were armed. 1 fled on foot, and an officer-involved shooting ensued at that time. The individual that ran and fled from the car initially, he ran some distance away. We set up a perimeter around the block, and then ultimately we just stayed there and waited for our tactical team to come in, and ultimately got him into custody as well. But as far as any of the details as to the shooting and who was armed and who wasn't, I'm not going to go into that now. What I can tell you is we did recover 2 guns from the scene directly where the suspects were at.
Identification of the suspect still hasn't happened?
We've identified them. We're not releasing it yet. We still want to ensure that we make all the proper contacts to everyone that we need to, that we typically do. We're not releasing the officers' names either at this point, but we're evaluating that daily as to a point when we can actually do that.
So, can you give them an idea about when?
I can't,
Okay.
but we are evaluating it daily. We're looking at it.
I mean, does it seem as if that everything happened, by the book, or the shooting was clean, basically?
Well, it's still really early on. It's only 2 days old, and it's a pretty complicated incident, that were involved here, right? Obviously, there were 2 people that were killed. It's a very serious incident for the city, for the department. We take it very serious, and we have homicide investigating. We have our internal affairs investigating. The district attorney's office is investigating for an outside look at it, which is pretty typical to how we handle these officer-involved shootings. So what I can tell you is that I don't want to make any statements now as to it, only because it's very early still and we're still investigating it.
Our office was informed immediately. I always get nervous when I get calls in the middle of the night or late at night from the police department. I've talked to DA. They are doing an independent investigation. That is the current procedure. I'm reviewing in the future whether or not we might have an independent inspector general of our own. But for right now, that is the procedure. DA's office always does an independent investigation.
Why are you contemplating the inspector general post?
We currently have an inspector general. It's internal. Many cities now have inspector generals that report directly to the city manager and mayor. Just so that you can't question whether it's independent or not. Right?
So it's an independent.
Right now, it's located within the police department, so I'm considering taking it, and still within the city, but reporting directly to the mayor and city manager.
But you haven't decided if you're going to do that?
We're going to be meeting, conferring with the police officers union, and I'm studying the different models of other cities. It's one of the reasons I went to Detroit a couple of weeks ago, because they have that model.
And does it have a particular concern with this shooting that you're thinking about this? Or?
I want people to feel comfortable, because we've had this long history. I think the police department is much better than it was when I was growing up in the 60s, but I think there's still a history of mistrust in the city. The chief, when he first came, did the survey that found that 40% of our residents don't trust the police. And I'm working very hard to bridge that gap. To have more local people hired as police officers, to have police officers out of their cars walking the streets, to have police officers attend community meetings and introduce themselves at schools. I think that the city has to come together around crime and violence, and that we have to work together.
Chief, so I understand, I've followed this closely, but there were 3 suspects, two were killed. The third one that survived, was that person injured, or that suspect, the surviving suspect, were they injured at all, or not?
No, the surviving suspect was not injured.
Not injured,
The person was taken into custody of the yards. As he fled into the yards, like I said, we set up a perimeter, and we basically held. Obviously, it was a violent incident. There were armed suspects. We were concerned about not only our officer safety going and looking for the suspect, but also, trying to reduce the confrontation that might occur there. So what we ended up doing is we had our helicopter out. The helicopter located the suspect. We had our tactical team respond, and we staged and ultimately took the suspect into custody there. Initially, the suspect did not give up, but at some point, the suspect did listen to our commands and and we took him into custody.
And the status of that person now, do you know if they've been charged yet, or what's the status of that?
They are still in custody at this
In
point.
custody, and it hasn't been brought to the DA yet, as far as you know?
As far as I don't know.
Okay.
There were some reports saying that it was a gang-related tip. Can you speak to that?
I can't.
Can you talk about how big of a police response, and once you get word that there could be a violent incident there, how much of a presence you sent to that area, or can you get into that? Or?
I can't give you exactly, but it was relatively rapid that we had to respond. We did send officers there, and ultimately our response was relatively large because, as I said, we did have to set up a fairly wide perimeter, which took officers from throughout the area to establish that. The tactical team, when it gets called in, there's significant resources that are brought in for that as well.
Yeah.
And then ultimately I responded, Assistant Chief Jordan responded, Deputy Chief Israel responded, and while on scene there we monitored from the incident command post as to what was occurring, and so it was a significant response throughout the incident.
And just in terms of that, I know I've been to other press conferences at police headquarters where the police department has looked into trying to stop some of these, when you get information there could be some kind of violent incident, try to stop that or prevent it. I mean, is there kind of an inherent danger in that? I mean, I could see you want to stop something, but on the flip side, you know, some of these violent, you know, there's could be violent confrontation like what happened the other night.
Well, absolutely, and you know, our concern is always if you get information on any day about some crime going to occur, what we cannot happen is we can't not respond, obviously. And so if we get that information in advance, we have to respond, because if we wait and do not respond, then it's a good potential that crime could be carried out. So in this particular incident, we responded as quickly as we could, and unfortunately the suspects were uncooperative at the time we tried to stop them, and a shooting ensued.
And you can't put the suspect's name out 2 days later?
Not yet, no.
Because?
They're still attempting to identify all the family members and make all the notifications that they want to make.
Kim, kind of shifting the subject, can you give me the sort of a status update under you or Council Member Reed on the parcel tax vote?
Well, you know, it's going to council June 7th, 21st? 21st.
It's the 21st.
21st, that's right. It's going to their 21st.
It'll be coming to the city council for the 21st for us, for the full council to vote, for it to be placed on the ballot.
And I know, Mayor Kwan, you wanted to get this as soon as possible in front of the voters.
At this point, I think since the main thing I was originally trying to do was if we had voted the urgency when I originally raised it, I was trying to both meet what we thought then was Jerry Brown's, I tried to put something on the June ballot. But more importantly, I was hoping to know we would have known by July 5th, which is right at the beginning of the fiscal year, and to avoid unnecessary layoffs. Now, even if it passes, that is, it's budget C and not budget B, there are probably going to be about 200 people who are going to be laid off for sure in July, because we won't know whether or not a parcel tax passes until November. So I was hoping to not disrupt people's lives. I think whenever you do a layoff of that many people, you'll lose the best people. I was this former school board member. I hated the state rule that requires you to, if you have any chance at all of laying off a teacher, you have to let them know on March 15th. What would always happen is my youngest and best teachers would find jobs at districts that didn't have to reach them every year. And because it's too hard emotionally for teachers to have to constantly be getting these layoff notices, not knowing if they're going to have the job next year. So I was really hoping to know whether or not we had a parcel tax and whether or not it had passed by early July. Now that won't happen, and that there's a very good chance because we don't have the cushion we had in past years. So for instance, last year we had a cushion for the prevention programs. And we were able to keep them going during the time we were waiting for the fall election to see if Measure BB passed. I don't have that cushion at this point. We've gone now through 4. This will be our 5th year of cuts, and there's no cushion at all. So there will be people who will be getting layoff notices. We're starting to notify people. The departments are beginning to identify the people, and we'll be starting to notify people within weeks now.
And Councilmember Reed, can you just tell me the timeline? Like, if council does approve it, how long does it take from that vote to actually getting the ballots mailed?
It's a set time frame. It depends on when they decide, whether or not they decide a specific date. If it's a mail ballot, it's one thing. I was in Sacramento this morning. There is a buzz that Jerry may get a compromise for a November election. There are some people who think it's not going to happen, but there are enough people who think it's going to happen. And so the best thing would be if we do it in a consolidated, because there'll be more people voting. There's also the decision they have to make about the city attorney, whether or not they're appointing or whether or not they're going to hold an election. So what we clearly want to do is only have one election. And so there's a lot of balls in the air, and that's one of the reasons why we chose a later date rather than an earlier date to decide on the parcel tax.
And some of my colleagues are looking at some other items to put on the ballot. They just don't want the partial tax to just be freestanding. So some of my colleagues are looking at some other things that they would like to place on the ballot. And I'm certainly hoping that we don't place the city attorney's election on the ballot. I'm hoping that we will be able to appoint someone and then have the election in November of 2012. But that's just my wishful thinking.
So there's a lot of balls in the air.
Mayor, what's the billing? I know you wanted to have the parcel tax on originally to make it with Jerry Brown's consolidated state election so that you could make the fall tax bill. When's the soonest tax bill that the partial tax would appear on if it's in November?
It'd be the following year if it were to win in the fall.
Yeah.
Even if it had been a mail election, I mean, obviously we would have made the billing if it were in July. We won't make the billing now, but it'll be just like BB. We will probably just not bill this year and bill for 2 years the following year.
And there's some sort of loan or something you get to?
We could lend ourselves the money for the interim year. We still have some reserves,
Okay.
as long as we're guaranteed that they'll be paid back.
I've got two questions. The first is there any discussion or thought to go to the voters for amendment of Measure Q for the libraries, like you did with Measure BB?
Not for me.
Okay, and the second thing is San Jose just yesterday approved an increase in living wage to $13.59 an hour, which is $2 higher than Oakland's. Is anybody on the council, the mayor's office, going to take the lead in terms of raising the issue for what's going to in terms of Oakland's ordinance was based originally when it was passed on a set of numbers, and it's adjusted by the consumer price index. San Jose does a calculation every 3 years or so, looking at the national guidelines. There's a whole memo from the city manager I have here, and they said that needed to go up. So with that kind of disparity, reconciling that with the fact that your overtures to the companies in China and at ICSC are going to be to primarily low-wage employers to bring them here. Is that a factor in not adjusting the living wage?
Well, I think you could probably go ask any of my colleagues on the council and raise that question to them. I'm sure you may find one that may have an interest in bringing that item before the council for consideration. So, I mean, I have no plans on, as a member of the city council, as president of the city council, I have no plans on bringing it before my colleagues, but certainly you could probably find one or two of my colleagues on the council that may be interested in doing that. And I certainly hope that they would think things out from A to Z before they do.
And the only reason I raise it is because there's been so much publicity done about the Walk to End Poverty Tomorrow
Right.
and all the stuff the community action program's doing. And none of the city's actions seem to be aligned with what the national community action agencies are suggesting and doing. And so, is it
Well,
just...
I disagree with you, at least from my perspective. I mean, the jobs that I'm hoping, this fruit that I talk about, that from this trip that we went on, certainly those jobs are not going to be low-wage jobs that will come to Oakland. And so my whole focus on being, and I'm sure that it's the mayor's focus, on seeking out employers that's going to pay people a decent wage, where in fact they can be able to provide health benefits for their families and to pay them a decent wage to be able for their families to live. And the jobs that I'm hoping that will come out of our trip to China will in fact do just that. They're not low-end jobs that we're talking about attracting to the city. These are substantial paying jobs that will allow a family to be able to live on.
So hypothetically speaking, if Foodsco was told that they had to pay a minimum wage, a living wage of $13.59, do you think that would be a deal breaker for them, or?
I have no idea. That's a question you asked, and you need to ask Foodsco. I know that Foodsco wants to come into this market in Northern California. That's why they're committed to building 3 stores. That's why we're hoping to break ground either the end of June or the 1st of July on the first 73,000 square foot grocery store in my council district in the city of Oakland.
You have spoken earlier, previous months, about trying to get kids into summer jobs, and given that actually Chief Batts has talked about the summer is going to be pretty hot, what is the city kind of doing in that area in terms of employment for youth?
Let me bring the wood person next time. I can't tell you what I've been doing personally. Did we finish sending out the letters? We've been sending out letters to all the major employers in Oakland, telling them that the federal government, for the first time in decades now, will not fund the Mayor's Summer Jobs programs. We usually count on for 500 jobs, so we've lost those, and asking if they will step up. I just spoke yesterday to the joint meeting of the school districts Academy Partners. What do they call that process? There's a new name now, I'm sorry. That's basically the employers that work with the school to career academies.
Linked Learning.
The Linked Learning Coalition, and there were dozens of employers there with the academies. Many of the jobs that we offer during the summertime are linked to career paths within the school district. I'm hoping to launch my own Strengthen program that Larry's worked with in the past with the cadets and explorers for the police department, linked with the Laney College Law and Justice program, and strengthening our Grow Your Own police program. And so I'm taking what little money I have left over in the mayor's office and I'm investing it in that program. So, and I'm asking all of the employers, in addition to that, to consider taking a teacher this summer and to offer externships for, salary sub pay is about $100 a day. For about $1,000, you can bring a teacher in for 2 weeks to shadow your business. A lot of teachers have been out of the workforce for a long time, and the character of jobs has just changed, even for you guys in the media. I mean, you guys are running now around with all these high-tech stuff and computers and video cameras. You do everything, right? And I remember when there used to be full crews that did all of the stuff, and now you guys have to do it all. Video, reporters, reporting, taking pictures. Think of how your jobs have changed, and what I've been particularly asking for this summer is for some of the employers to help our teachers get a better sense of what their requirements are, by offering them externships for either 2 weeks or a month, so that they'll have a better sense of what's needed. And it's something I used to do when I was a school board member, and yesterday Tony and Smith and I sort of launched that ask. So I sent a letter to our major corporations. I've asked them to consider taking interns and externs for the summer.
Chief, clarity on something. You said that for the first time, or I forget exactly, but there's not going to be funding for the Mayor's Summer Job Program from the federal government. But
no federal funding, and that usually supplied 300 to 500 jobs a year.
And what Gay Cobb said last year was that the federal government, for the first time in 10 years, was funding youth jobs. So are there two separate programs? That's
Cobb. You were talking
Gay
about
Cobb from Private Industry Hustle. She said for the first time in 10 years.
I think she was talking about the expanded Obama initiative for last year. There's always been funding for our grant. Maybe that was for WIB. But for the mayor's program, there has been funding for quite a long time. And this is the first time it's been cut. Last year, Obama did an additional initiative that I think did go to Gay's agency. And that's definitely not happening. And even the core historical funding that probably goes back to Johnson's days in the war on poverty. I mean, there have been mayor summer youth job programs for as long as I was in the school board, so that's back 20 years.
Well, WIB as a whole might be cut, right? And the Republicans are considering cutting WIB as a whole. Is that-
Yes, and CDBG as a whole.
Yeah.
But what they definitely did cut in this year's budget, which is sort of also a precedent, they never cut in the middle of the year like this. So we were counting on that money. I was thinking that what I would do is add to it. I'll be lucky to get up to our past numbers with just private employers.
And what's your response been from the private employers?
The letters just went out about a week ago, and I've been doing some follow-up calls, but I don't know.
What are your thoughts about the council's decision Wednesday regarding the injunction? Are you optimistic about success of the program?
I never make people happy with me, so let's just go back to my core position on injunctions. I think the injunctions are like stay-away orders. Had I had my preference, we would have done individual stay-away orders rather than clumping them as so-called gang injunctions. I think it was over-ambitious, 45 people. You can see that they're beginning to drop people. The same thing happened in North Oakland. North Oakland, they started with 40 people. By the time we finally got the injunction, we were down to 18, and by the time the injunctions were actually on the street, 10 of the 18 were already in jail. So I don't quite get the process, except that it probably looks good in the media, and you do create some sense of, okay, we're being serious. But in my own district, and this doesn't make the anti-injunction people, I use injunctions on several cases where I knew very specific kids were mugging the little ladies in very certain neighborhoods, or where we knew drug dealing had been going on again and again at a certain park or a certain location. So we used them against people who had been arrested and associated with those crimes. I think you can do that. What I worry about, and this is what made me very sad, is we're using a lot of energy around this. When I became mayor, almost all the real gang prevention work had stopped in the Fruitvale. And it took me over a month to get the gang task force up and running again, to get the parent involvement process running again, to get the call-ins running again. And now we're moving towards next year with a strategy, and the Fruitvale area in particular, to work with the middle school students, to work with the kids who are the most truant. And this coincides with some stuff we're doing with Tony Smith in the district overall. But if we're trying to keep kids out of the gangs, we got to really target some of the middle school students who are chronically truant, we think. We think that's our best chance. We also think a stepped-up call-in program is very important. And so what my sense is that we've spent both a huge amount of resources and a huge amount of energy fighting over these injunctions, where there are other ways just to do it, to start working on the gangs and to go after these individuals. So the council has voted to uphold the program and to test it in these two areas. And so we'll look at how it works. But meanwhile, I don't think it's enough. I've been trying to kickstart a lot of the other intervention and prevention programs. And unfortunately, because of this controversy, a huge amount of time and energy, those things weren't going when I came into office 4 months ago.
And Chief, do you think the dropping the John Doe portion, what impact do you think that will have? Any thoughts?
Well, I think that's probably a question that is better answered by the city attorney's office as far as the legal strategy of what impact that has. But what it does, the impact for us specifically is that we have identified particular people that we're interested in looking at and putting an injunction. And that goes right along with what the chief, his direction has been, is that we use intelligence-based policing, we focus on individuals we know that are involved in violent crime. And that's really what this accomplishes for us. It is specific people, it's not random, it places them in there. So as far as the John Doe aspect of it, it does, again, the legal strategy, I'll let you talk to the city attorney about that, but for us, it really specifies we've identified people, they're involved in crime, we think they're the bad people in the community we need to address and look at further, and we're doing that.
Yeah. And I'm going to end that here, and I agree. There are clearly people on that list that we probably should have injunctions on, and we should focus on them. So thank you very much.